Welcome back to Easy Moto Tim. The low, premium, hand-adjustable shocks on the modern Harley touring bikes give a really harsh ride. These shocks are stock on the Street Glide Special, the Road Glide Special, and the Ultra Limited Low. In this video, we'll look at replacing these shocks with Öhlins HD 774 shocks. The low version of the Harley shocks has an adjustable preload dial on the left shock. The right shock handles rebound dampening and is not adjustable. The suspension travel on these shocks is only 2.1 inches, which contributes significantly to the harsh ride. I decided to change the shocks on my Road Glide Special and my wife's Ultra Limited Low to the Öhlins to improve the ride comfort. I took a few videos of the installation, and I'll explain what I did to set up the shocks. For this installation, you'll need to consult a service manual to get the proper torque setting for the shock mounting bolts on your bike. You'll also need to follow the instructions in the mounting instructions and owner's manual booklets, which is supplied with the shocks. You'll need to adjust your shocks for your bike and your weight. The shocks are available with standard spring or a heavy spring, and the optimum settings for these two styles are different. Today I'm going to install a set of Öhlins HD 774 shock absorbers for the rear of my Road Glide Special. They come with an installation manual and an owner's manual. The shocks and washers and sleeves. These are blackline 12-inch shocks because the shocks on my Road Glide Special are the low version. These Öhlins shocks are adjustable. They have a preload on the spring. This wheel rotates to apply more preload to the spring. They have a dampening adjustment here, and they also have a length adjustment so that you can make it fit the exact ride height, either of the way the bike is set up from the factory or the way you want it to be. I've installed the right shock absorber. I used the factory bolt and washer, and then the supplied spacer, sleeve spacer at each end. I torqued the bolts to the factory specs. Be sure to look up what the factory spec is for your bike. And I used blue thread locker. That's in the service manual that you should use blue thread locker. I watched some YouTube videos on installing these shocks and read the owner's manual a couple of times. I wasn't entirely clear on what to do to set up the shocks until I started working on the bike. Setting up the shocks begins with setting the proper sag. Sag is the distance the rear of the bike settles when you're riding. Mathematically, sag is the difference between the height of a point above the rear axle when the bike is not loaded and the height when the bike is loaded. This is a picture of the measurement of the stock shocks. Heights are measured vertically from the axle to a point on the fender support, even with the top bolt of the shock. I put a piece of yellow tape on the strut to mark the top point. I put a piece of tape on both sides. I decided to take the measurements of the stock shocks so I would have something to compare to after installing the Öhlins. I used a scissor jack to set the bike up so all the weight was off the swing arm and the tire was just above the floor to make the first measurement, which Öhlins calls R1. Next, I lowered the scissor jack so the weight of the bike was on the tire, but the bike was still vertical. The measurement in this position is R2. The manual for these shocks calls the difference in these two measurements free sag. For these shocks, the free sag should be between 5 and 15 millimeters. The free sag of the stock shocks was 5 millimeters. This is a picture of the Öhlins shock measurement. I took the R1 and R2 measurements. The free sag was under 5 millimeters, so I backed off the preload nut from 18 turns to 17 turns and measured again. I repeated taking measurements until I was down to 15 turns and 9.5 millimeters of sag, which is in the middle of the 5 to 15 millimeter range. On my wife's Ultra, which is heavier, 18 turns was a good starting point. Okay, I got on the bike with my helmet and jacket and boots on and sat on the bike, and my wife measured the sag. So without any weight on the bike, the sag is 9.5 millimeters, and with me on the bike it's 25 millimeters, and both are in the acceptable range for starting. As I mentioned in the video, I lowered the scissor jack so that I could sit on the bike while my wife took the loaded measurement, which is R3. The manual calls the difference between R1 and R3 ride height. That's a misnomer. It should be called ride sag. Anyways, ride sag should be 25 to 35 millimeters for these shocks. At 15 turns, the ride sag was 25 millimeters. If your ride sag is less than the minimum, then there's too much preload, and you should reduce the number of turns on the preload nut. If your ride sag is more than the maximum, you don't have enough preload, and you should increase the number of turns on the preload nut. Now the manual says that you should add 1 turn to the preload nut for every 25 pounds of weight you add. I added 1 turn for the weight of the stuff in my saddlebags. When traveling, I carry an additional 25 to 30 pounds of stuff, so I add another turn to accommodate that weight. There's 20 clicks on the rebound dampening screw here, and from here I just have to ride the bike, see how it performs, and make adjustments according to the manual. I talked with an Ohlins tech at their tent in Daytona during Bike Week. I asked the tech about adjusting the rebound. He said, if you want to ride like a Cadillac, increase the setting from 20 clicks to 22 clicks. For a ride like a Porsche, decrease the clicks from 20 to 16. I tried both. At 22 clicks, the ride was way too bouncy, and at 16 clicks, the ride was okay, but pretty stiff. I'm pretty happy with 18 clicks. Remember, these are settings for my bike and my weight. Your settings may be very different. So that's just about it for installing Öhlins Blackline on a Harley-Davidson Road Glide Special. Thanks for watching this video. If you like the video, please click the thumbs up, as it really helps us by letting YouTube know that others might like to see this video. You can support the channel by clicking on the Amazon product links in the description. I'll see you in the next video.